As we begin Lesson 1 for Unit 1, we're going to be talking about fractions throughout this unit. It's important to remember that when we have a fraction such as 1/3, which we have here, 1/3, the 1 in this fraction is the numerator, and the 3 is the denominator. So the top number is the numerator, and the bottom number is the denominator. We're introducing fraction bars to students. Each student has a whiteboard this is actually a picture of the fraction boards, the whiteboards that we use in class. The top bar here shows one whole. The other bars, if you look all the way down, show this same whole divided into different numbers of equal parts. The parts are labeled halves, thirds, fourths, and so on. This just indicates how each bar is divided. The bar that's labeled halves obviously is divided into two parts. You can see here two parts. At a time I'll ask students, please shade in 1/2 of the halves bar, and they would just simply shade in with their marker 1/2. And then once we get to comparing fractions, I might say compare 1/2 and 2/4. And so they may go down and then shade in the 2/4, and they're able to see that way that 1/2 is equal to 2/4. We use these not only to identify fractions, but also to talk about unit fractions. And we will move on here to unit fractions. A unit fraction is one part of a whole. 1/4 is one part of a whole. So 1/4 is one of 4 equal parts of a whole. It's always important to remember when we look at a unit fraction that the numerator is always going to be 1. We can use unit fractions to build a whole, and here's an example, which would be just 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 3/3, and 3/3 is equal to 1 whole. We remind students that any time we have the same top number and bottom number, the same numerator and denominator, it's equal to 1 whole. Some example problems that we're going to see for you as students begin to practice working with fraction bars would be if we take a fraction bar, the one that I have labeled here, the one I have pictured for you here, is broken into fourths. And I would say to the students, label the first part of this fraction bar with the correct unit fraction. And they would say, okay, the first part here is just this first bar. I'm going to shade it in. And they would say, okay, the first one is 1/4. Okay? Then I might ask them to circle the first two parts of the fraction bar. Okay, and so they would go through and they would circle the first two pieces of the fraction bar, and I would say label that for me, and the students would say 2/4, and then I would ask them to please show me that in a reduced format, and they would say 1/2, and they could see that 2/4 here is equal to 1/2 of the total bar. We'd also look at asking them to write this fraction bar as a unit fraction, and when I ask a student to write a bar as a unit fraction, it would just, with this problem, it would be 1/4, represents this first section here, plus the next section, which is also 1/4, plus the next section, 1/4, plus the next section here, 1/4, equals 4/4, or 1 whole. And that is what we're working on in Lesson 1.